Hey, tennis fans, you are listening to Matchpoint Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We're also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre as we continue to wind down the season. We have a special guest this week as we recap the WTA Finals. ATP Finals are underway, Mike, and I have to say, this was a fantastic week for Canadian tennis.
Yeah, it's kind of appropriate that we're recording this on Remembrance Day here in Canada because
Mhm.
definitely a lot of patriotic vibes in terms of what our men and women have done with a title from Denis Shapovalov, title from Rebecca Marino, and a big title for Gaby Dabrowski and Erin Routliffe, which we will break down later. But first, as you mentioned, great having Blair Henley back with us. I think one of the most respected voices in sport in tennis for sure. And someone who's just like skyrocketed the last few years in terms of how many big tournaments want her to be working their events, and why not? I mean, she's first of all one of the most positive people we've ever spoken to. She knows her tennis inside and out, being a former college tennis player, and she's just got such just a positive vibe about the sport, and is one of those people that I think pushes the sport forward and helps grow it. And she was certainly able to do that. It sounds like this past week in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's one of the more versatile hosts in our sport today, and we've seen that through a variety of work she's done. I remember first discovering her through YouTube channels and seeing her with coaching tips, which was awesome, and instantly being hooked by her energy there. And she brings that same energy whether she's doing, on court emceeing, interviewing players, anything behind the scenes. I had the privilege of working alongside her a bit last summer at the National Bank Open, and she's, a consummate professional, but always having fun as well. You can tell she really loves her job, and it shows in her work.
And she's super versatile, as you mentioned, and as she'll mention in the interview, that versatility really, that strength of hers, I think, led to some fantastic content that she was able to get, some stuff that she's going to share with us here in this interview. And so, without waiting any longer, let's have a listen to our chat from earlier today with Blair Henley. This week on Matchpoint Canada, we are thrilled to welcome back to the podcast one of the most recognizable voices in the sport. We've been lucky enough to have her here at the National Bank Open in the past, and you've likely caught her on TV or in person doing her incredible hosting duties on the court. She's a regular with us on Matchpoint Canada, good friend of the podcast. Ben, I'll let you take it away from there.
Yeah, so happy to welcome on our friend and tennis host, Blair Henley, who was just in Riyadh covering the WTA Finals. So very timely, Blair. Thanks so much for joining the podcast again. Great to see you as always.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
I can't believe the time travel, not time traveling, but the time zone traveling you've done since finishing off your duties in Saudi Arabia. You've covered the WTA finals many times in different places, including at home in Texas. First time in Saudi Arabia hosting it. How did you compare it and find it compared to other years?
Yeah, so this was my third WTA finals. I did the final year in Singapore. I did the year in Fort Worth, which is where I live. And then this is number three in Riyadh. And full disclosure, I was there working for the WTA, hired by the WTA. And I'm excited to tell you guys about my experience. And I just want to clarify that it is my experience. I'm going to tell you guys about
Mhm.
what it was like for me. I totally understand why that was a complicated is probably the most charitable way to put it. Location for a lot of tennis fans. My experience and what the player experience was in no way erases the reasons why it was complicated. Yes, there are human rights abuses. We could spend a long time listing those. So I want to make sure, it's clear that I want to share my experience. I'm going to give you as honest evaluation as I can. I know though that my experience doesn't erase those things. So that's sort of my caveat before we get started.
Well, we appreciate the full disclosure on
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it was overall, I think Coco said in her trophy acceptance speech, 10 out of 10. And from an event perspective, again, there's definitely room to grow. The first year of any event, you're going to have some growing pains and some things. Maybe, okay, we didn't quite think of this, and this is something that we need to grow in the future. But as far as first year events go, it was really well done from an organization perspective. Even little things like transportation, everything was all very organized. And the location for the tournament was at King Saud University, which is the top university in Saudi Arabia, and it's a large space. I'm sure I only saw a chunk of it, but there was lots of space to work with. And I am telling you, I feel like I'm going to go with 95% of the space that I saw was decked out in purple decals, branding, WTA Finals Riyadh, player faces. So again, I think we got some student turnout there. I don't know for sure. That's just sort of the eye test. I spent a lot of time in the fan zone. So if you were a student at King Saud University, I think you surely knew that this
Something
event
was
was
happening.
happening.
Hmm.
Yeah, so from that perspective and sort of the players walking on site and feeling special, I think they did a really good job.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Match Point Canada. If you'd like to follow along every week, give us a like below. Hit the subscribe button as we're trying to make 15,000 subs. And look, I think as well as us or better than anyone that it's always the tennis that's going to sell the event better than ever. And I have to say, this was probably from an entertainment standpoint, one of my favorite WTA finals in years. And you look at just the final itself, Coco Gauff, how hard she had to fight to overcome Zheng Qinwen in a three-set thriller. She was down a set, down a break in the second, Zheng serving for it in the third, so many twists and turns. Firstly, I'll ask, do you think this was the match of the year? And I just wanted to note, I love what you said, that if this match was, say, your first exposure to women's tennis, how would you not be hooked? It was like two incredible athletes just going toe to toe.
I have gotten chills so many times in the last like 10 days, but just you recounting that, it's happening again because yes, this was likely the first ever tennis match for a lot of people. Yes, we had lots of Chinese fans in the stands. They showed up big time. It was deafening, you guys. The
Wow.
gyos and on the changeovers. Miriam Bly was in the chair, and by the end, I think was having a little bit of a hard time sort of wrangling things. But there were also lots of locals who came to watch, and hopefully this was a taste of something that they want more of. But I also think sort of the trajectory of the attendance throughout the week, it kept sort of going like this. That to me is a result of, and we saw the same thing in Fort Worth, where they had not very much time to tell people that this was happening. And by the end of the week, we had a solid crowd. Fort Worth, to be fair, was a massive stadium, but it was packed. And the hope is that those people are going to tell their family members, their friends, hey, this was a really cool experience. I believe ticket prices were pretty affordable. And that is, as somebody who loves tennis and wants other people to love tennis, really, really cool. And props to Qinwen and Coco for putting on a show. I always have recency bias. I will own
Hmm.
that, but I'm going to say yes, sure, why not? I'm going to call it the match of the year. It was just in terms of, again, I like matches where somebody who has never seen tennis before, again, a novice fan can come and be like, whoa, that was like athleticism at work right there, even if you have no idea what a forehand is supposed to look like. And this was that, and those momentum shifts at the end, and just sort of the relatability of not quite being able to close it out. And the fact that Coco really clawed her way. Coco seemed like she was behind for that entire match until that final set tiebreak. So they put on a show both on the court and off the court as well. I thought that the WTA did an incredible job with that photo shoot, but these women were also incredible in the press room. I My job there, just to give you guys a little more perspective of what I was doing, I did not do the on-court work there. Andrew Krasny was on court with a co-host who could speak Arabic, which is key. Sadly, that's not one of my skills quite yet.
Not yet.
But I
Yeah.
did not yet. I've got some work to do this year if I want to go back. But I did a lot of the sort of off-court hosting. So for those who aren't familiar, there are suite visits. We had some legends come in and did meet and greets, and I helped facilitate some of those. And I did a lot of work on the fan stage as well. And I had a point to why I was going through this. Oh, yes. The thing that I don't normally get to do is I got to sit in a lot of press conferences. And again, I sort of treated it as research. And also, if I can, be an extra body there to potentially ask a question that clarify something that happened in a match or off the court. And, that's an added bonus, hopefully. But they were so much fun to listen to in the press room setting, which is a little bit different from what I normally do on the court and during media days. Sometimes you get different sort of types of answers in the press room setting. I particularly enjoyed the fact that Qinwen is very frank. I
Mhm.
asked her, she was asked several questions throughout the week about, her relationship with Riva. And one of the questions I asked her was, I had watched some of their practices, and she was the one telling him what she wanted to do. And I asked in press, I was like, is that how it usually is? Do you normally tell him what you need, or is he the one telling you what you need? And she launched into, apparently this was, I maybe hit on a little bit of a hot button issue. But she actually used the word fight. Like they had fought in practice on who should be directing things. And that is, again, more
Than
candid
most.
than we normally
Definitely.
get in a press conference. And she elaborated. She said they've had to come up with a system before a match. She gets to tell him what he needs. And like, for instance, during the off-season stretch, the deal is that he's the one telling her exactly what's happening, the itinerary of the practice. So again, it was insight that you don't always get. Coco, I thought, was as per usual, excellent in press, even from the very beginning, explaining that yes, she did have some reservations playing at a tournament in Saudi Arabia. And it was interesting then to hear her trophy ceremony speech saying 10 out of 10. Like this was a great, as a player, this was a great experience. So again, it was nice to be in press as well and just hear from some of the players, hearing from, Barbora Krejcikova, who I feel like is always great. Another one who, is gonna tell you things potentially that you might not have known before, which is always, it seems like it shouldn't be that hard, but sometimes it is that hard to get those little nuggets where you're like, oh, that's news to me. Apparently
Yeah.
she sews. I didn't know that. She's going
Oh,
to be working on her sewing project in her vacation in the Maldives.
That's not what I would be doing if
she
I were in the
deserves that.
Maldives, but teach
I
their own,
mean,
right?
same,
Yeah.
Yeah.
same, right?
Well, you hit on, I mean, Coco, who I felt as well when she was just in Toronto, fantastic in press and always generous with their time. And to me, that's impressive for an athlete when things are maybe not going to script or going as well as you think they should. And I was looking back, like Mike and I were having conversations about what went wrong at the US Open with her, the struggles with double faulting, a changing of her coach parting ways with Brad Gilbert. And now you look at the way she's closed 2024. I mean, not only winning this title, but her path, beating Iga Swiatek, who she had a nightmare 1-11 record against, taking out Arina Sabalenka before Zheng in the final. How big of a finish is this for Coco? And maybe what does that do for her with 2025, of course, right around the corner?
I think it was massive. And I think the win over Qinwen, where she was sort of behind, or it felt like she was behind the whole match, that's one of those wins that you can file away in the back of your head and remind yourself that, hey, I can do this when you're in that situation again against the best players in the world. So that was huge. It was interesting, again, in press to hear Coco say that pettiness drives her. Which I find that so fascinating because it's not like she grew up in a family that wasn't supportive. It's not like,
Yeah.
there are people in her home being like, you're never going to be any good. Like, by all accounts, she's had so much love and support and encouragement. And then she gets in this situation where, as a public figure, unfortunately, there are people out there who have nothing better to do than to criticize 20-year-olds athletes. But she can use it as fuel in a way that is so foreign to me. Like for me, if I were trying to prove haters wrong, I would just be white knuckling so hard that I would probably be a complete mess on the tennis court. But question for you guys, do you think Matt Daly gets a late season nod as coach of the year? Because boy, what a few months he's had. And Jean-Christophe Farrell, I guess, as well.
Are you flipping things on us, sort of like that coaching dynamic?
Yes,
Like now it's your
sorry, I
turn
can't
to.
help it. This
Yeah, I
thought came to
mean,
my mind because it
yeah.
hasn't been talked a lot about actually.
It's true. I mean, obviously, it's been an outstanding couple of months, the work that he's managed to pull. And I just think like watching a couple of those wins, and sometimes, I mean, you can attest to this. I think some of the stats in some of Coco's matches don't really tell the story. Like you'll see a really high unforced error count from Sabalenka, and you're thinking, what was going wrong there, but Coco just makes you earn it over and over and over again. And I felt she was just like she kind of leads her opponents into like a pressure cooker where
Mhm.
like Zhang, she pressed too much in when she was trying to close. And then if you take your foot off the gas, then Coco's on offense. She's really, really difficult to play.
I was
Yeah,
also really surprised that that coaching change even happened so soon, really, when you think about it, because it's not like her and Brad Gilbert had been working together for years and years, and they had so much
True.
immediate success when they joined up in the summer of 23. Um, but I guess when you're 20, maybe a little bit more impatient, or maybe you just know yourself that it's time for a new voice. And she clearly seems to be someone who responds to a new coach almost like immediately, right? It's like
yeah.
we see it in pro sports when the team's struggling for a while. Well, what option do you have? The first one is usually fire the coach for a new perspective. And in tennis as well, I mean, that coaching carousel this fall, I can hardly keep up with all the new players and the new coaches they have. But clearly, she knew what she was doing. And I mean, what better way could things have gone for her than what we've seen here?
She did talk about changing her serve grip, and she said, this
Mm.
fall you've seen sort of the side effects of changing or making, even if it's a slight adjustment to a grip, doing that in season. But I'm trying to remember, you guys, my tennis memory. This is like one of like it's like my kryptonite is like what happened where. But where did Coco play Arena? Was it in Wuhan and had all the double faults, but still it went to three sets?
I think it
Uh,
was in Wuhan. I should double check that though.
yeah.
I think you're right though.
I can't remember
But I
two
mean,
days ago, so don't look at
okay,
me, but it sounds about right.
right. But she took her to three tight sets
Yeah.
and had like 20 double faults.
Yeah.
So if anything,
21.
yes, thank you. If anything, somebody remembers remembers the
I
facts here.
cheated, but yeah.
He's quick at
Um,
Googling. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
continue.
Um, but yeah, I think that if anything, that has to be encouraging to know that you're coming close to getting these wins and you have a shot that is not working even close to its optimum level. But I also will say it was interesting. I got to watch again because I wasn't doing the on-court work. I got to watch a lot of that final like from right at the side of the court, from where Barbara Krejcikova's appointed chair usually is. But Coco on her forehand, it felt to me at least that she was driving through the shot a little bit more. Again, with the extreme grip, yes, there's always going to be this upward, brushing motion that it's harder to sort of have the long hitting track. But to me, it looked like there was more of that, more drive again, in general. She still has that loopy heavy ball as well, but she was also able to kind of go drive for drive with Zhang. So again, I gotten to watch a lot of Coco matches from right beside the court this year. No, I sure have not, but it was notable to me sitting there that I wonder if that's something that she's worked on is sort of doing more of the forward movement on the forehand, getting that longer hitting track versus straight up and
Hmm.
sort of above the head, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love your analysis. And Blair, you're just reminding us how versatile you are because, yeah, you can do so many different roles at these events. And it must have been nice to have a little bit of variety at this one for sure for you and show off some of your other skill set. Um, it's nice to see Coco back in that conversation because for a while, I don't want to say it was getting stale, but it was like Iga and Arena and the two of them kind of, sharing all or a lot of the big ones. And certainly Ben and I have talked about the two of them at length and with that number one ranking changing hands recently. And it's nice to see Coco reassert herself now into that conversation Because again, as you mentioned earlier, like recency bias, you're going by based of what you've seen lately. And for her, it had been some struggles for sure. How strong, now that you've seen these 8 women over the last week or so, how strong of a top 8 do you feel that this group is compared to perhaps some of the other years that you've seen? And do you think there's a high likelihood that we see a good majority of them back at this tournament, 12 months from now, maybe?
I definitely do, but then again, we had some surprises this year. Like I don't think, prior to Wimbledon, anybody would have thought that Barbara Krejcikova would have been there. And then, as she says, and I quote, I won 7 matches in a row. So
Yeah.
yes, I do think it's an incredibly solid top 8. But I feel like I always have to hedge because the WTA always finds a way to surprise us. But I have to say, shout out to Elena Rybakina also, who came out and looked pretty good, far better than
Mhm.
sort of I was expecting. I think even slightly better than maybe she was expecting because she told us in press that she had started practicing like 2.5 weeks before the tournament started, and her
Crazy.
last match before that was the first round of the US Open. That is a long period of time.
It's three
So to be
months,
able,
yeah.
yeah, to be able to come out and compete at the highest level was extremely impressive to me. So I again, and also sort of seeing her kind of, joking in press as well and joking. I loved what she said after she lost her opening match, I think was it to Jasmine Paolini? Gosh, again, see,
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I've had a memory wipe, but they they had Neymar out there tossing the coin. And after she lost the match, she's like, well, at least I got to meet Neymar. So
Nice.
seeing those little bits of sense of humor, again, it makes me think that she is going to be back in the mix at the beginning of the year. And then can I tell you guys sort of the behind the scenes of how the Goran Ivanisevic coaching drop
Well, I was going to
happened?
ask.
Yeah,
So
this
yeah,
is what we want. This is the kind of info. This is
Okay.
why we have you here, Blair. Yeah.
This was one of the most, and it's kind of hard to explain the story. So it wasn't really a tweetable thing because it was one of those like you kind of had to be there, but we're in media day press and she comes in and I believe it was Reem Abalil or Courtney Nguyen at the beginning of the presser asked about her coaching situation and she sort of alluded to working, having new voices. It was, nothing specific.
Mhm.
And other coaching things were brought up. Somebody asked about her former coach and what was true about the rumors that had come out about that relationship. Again, she understandably sort of hedged on a lot of those questions, but there were other conversations about coaches throughout the course of this press conference. And by the end, she still hadn't named someone. And so I believe it was Reem at the end who said, or maybe I'm trying to remember exactly who it was, but said, um, can you give us a name? So it was like she had been in there for 15 minutes, sort of talking
Dancing
all
around it.
around coaching situations. And finally, Reem was like, who is it? And it was the last question of the presser. They do last question in English. And she's like, she kind of has this half smile and she goes, Goran Ivanisevic. And then Reem's hand shot immediately right up and
Yeah.
they let her ask a follow-up question on that. But it was such like a mic drop at the end of this press conference. Like the one thing that everybody would have wanted to know, and it was one of the biggest headlines to come out of that day. But it was really funny. She definitely made everybody work for it, that's for sure.
Thank goodness they chose the right person to ask the question because sometimes at the end of a press conference, you're like, oh, I sure hope the last one's going to be a good one. Like, don't waste it with some
Right.
fluffball question, especially when people be getting closer to the truth there. So that's
Totally.
awesome.
Meanwhile, I was asking her if she was finally going to go skydiving this off season, which
Yeah, well,
she
these are
says
important things too, that
Yeah,
people want to know.
definitely.
So, right,
it's all a balance.
give us the complete picture. Um,
Right.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a question with a Canadian angle to it, of course, and and a doubles question as well, not just because that's pretty much 100% of the tennis I'm playing these days as I get a little bit older. I'm really loving doubles right now. But anyways, we'll save that for another episode. Gabby Dabrowski and Erin Routliffe, who are, I consider them both Canadians. Erin, grew up in Canada and lives here now. Um, What do you like about this tandem? We were obviously thrilled to see them finish the season this way. They've only been together really for, 15 months, I think, when you think about it. They've never even played a clay court season together because Gaby was injured this year. I think there's still so much for them to accomplish. But yeah, what do you like about this tandem, and what have you seen in terms of bringing out the best in each other since joining forces?
I love watching them play. I was at the US Open when they won, not this past year, but the year before that. They're so much fun, and shout out to, I think it was Erin she did some sort of press, but just talking about the prize money they won as a team. They won 1.125 million. And that's like, as Erin said, she was like, listen, we're just really thankful. That's like a life-changing amount of money.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it is for those Devils teams to make it to the year-end finals. It is big time in a way that, I mean, yes, it's also big time for the singles players. But I think it's big for the Devils players in that financial sense for sure. I always, when I think of Gabby Dabrowski, I I think of talking to her. I've talked to her many times over the years, but she's always made it clear to me that you do not have to be friends with your doubles partner. It is a business arrangement, or it can be a business arrangement. Like at baseline, it's business, and then maybe you end up liking the person also. But
No, not with these two.
see, right. Well, that's I think the thing that in the past, Gabby is always, I think sometimes on court interviewers, and I've over the years learned to not assume that doubles partners are friends. But
Yeah.
I think she's been asked that a lot, and I've heard her say, this is business. But I think that they also have the friendship aspect as well. And maybe that was the missing link. Maybe it's that important to have the business side, but also that personal relationship that can sort of sustain you through the length of a tennis season.
It's like with podcast hosts, it's the same thing. If you have them both,
Yeah.
like we do, then it's yeah, so much
It's
better.
all business here, Mike. I don't know
Oh,
what you're
okay.
talking about.
I thought we were besties. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No, I kid. As we wrap up, Blair, I guess just sort of looking back at the WTA season at large, I'll ask maybe what do you think has been maybe the biggest surprise story, kind of player of the year conversation as you reflect on 2024, maybe a couple takeaways on the WTA season at large.
Yeah, it was, I think at once you had sort of consistency that we maybe haven't seen consistency from more than one player, which I think is huge. And, in Jessie Pegula, in Arena Sabalenka with a couple of slams and a year-end world number one. Iga, again, didn't have her best year, but even when she's not at her best, she's solid. I think a big question mark is going to be what will we see Iga do at slams other than Roland Garros next year? I think that's
Yeah.
something to keep an eye on. And I think Coco has cemented herself at the top to be able to work through things on the court, mental, also technical, and still be and to be able to do it while you're playing is so incredibly hard to deal with the pressure that she faces in terms of eyeballs, especially as an American player, I think is again underrated and so difficult, and I give her a ton of credit for that. I think Barbara Krejcikova remains probably the surprise story of the year. But again, I so hope that she is feeling healthy. Number one, I'm excited for her to get to be able to rest her body because I think, especially in the home stretch of the season, she was maybe not feeling 100%, because I think the tour is better when she is feeling good because, man, she's one of my favorite just in terms of, somebody who used to teach a whole lot of tennis, just how smooth everything
Oh
is.
yeah.
So much fun to watch. So I hope that she is a factor in 2025. All really good things. But there's always still that caveat for surprise. You have a random, who knows?
Totally.
And I'll also say quickly, it was really nice to see. I saw Dasha Kazatkina she was there as an alternate, of course, got to play one admittedly quick match, but it was great to see her. And Danielle Collins was also there. And so I'm excited to see more of the Danimal in 2025. So I think things are like big things are happening. There's sort of, I feel like maybe there's a little bit of a buzz that we haven't had in recent years heading into this next year. Again, maybe that's my recency bias striking. Maybe that's me just coming straight from the WTA finals, but I'm
No, it feels
excited.
that way. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think
Um,
you summed it up nicely there, Blair. And hey, we're also excited to see what you've got in store for us in 2025. We hope you enjoy a brief rest too after a long and grueling tennis season. I mean, it's hard for people who work on it too, and I have no doubt that you need a few weeks to sort of recharge and spend some time with the family. And unless you've got some off season like the pros, you can do a bunch of like exhibitions and
No, guys, I'm calling it a season, as at least as far as I know, which will be good. I'm set to do Australia to work for Tennis Australia and one of their new products at the Australian Open, so I'm really excited about that. But can I add one more thing about my
Of course.
WTA Finals experience?
go for it. Sign off when you're done, okay?
Yes, I sure will. I just want to say that it was an incredible experience for me and meaningful in a way that I did not expect it to be, to do sort of the fan engagement piece of the hosting there. The fan stage was incredible, and to bring up, we had Garbine Muguruza, the tournament director, come up. We had, Andy Lavachkova, who was incredibly sweet, Lucy Safarova, Daniela Hantukova, and to see how excited the fans got for those Q&As and how like I didn't even have to ask questions. We had fans like standing right in front of the stage, like from kids to adults, men, women, getting a chance to ask these legends questions. And it was, again, probably for a lot of those people, their first introduction to professional tennis. And sometimes, for a lot of them, their first introduction to a female professional, famous athlete. One of the days that I was out there, we actually had Yara Al Hagbani, who is the first female Saudi professional tennis player. And again, is she going to be competing for top 50 in the world next year? Probably not. But she has played professional events and she is the first. She has a ton of social media followers. And seeing her come out there, and she's only 19, incredibly eloquent in the way that she spoke about her experience. But I just sort of noted there was a really long line to take photos with her afterward. And I was talking again to my colleague Reem Abalil, who covers tennis in that area of the world. And she was saying, Blair, you have to remember that 5 years ago, maybe less than 5 years ago, it was unheard of for a man to be a fan of a woman. And to see a long line of mixed men, women, kids walking up on that stage to take pictures, not only with Yara, but for every WTA legend that we had on the stage that week, was amazing to watch. And the hope is that, I thought often about Billie Jean King saying you have to see it to be it. And for these fans getting to see it, women being the star of the show, maybe for the first time in their lives, the hope is that maybe there is change to come. And as Coco Gauff said in press, it can't just be we come, we play, we leave. And I got to see behind the scenes. I got to see some of the things the WTA was doing behind the scenes, and there really is a plan for comprehensive exposure in that area of the world year round. And I have to think that that is going to have an impact on individuals. Yes, there is a massive big picture, but when you think of the individuals and the kids and the ones who I got to talk to, it was so special. And, I hope that they're all back next year. So it was a really incredible experience as far as actually interacting with the people who live there. And one other quick side note on that. Andy Lavachkova got to do a little panel with, I think there were like 10 local facilitators slash coaches. I think five or six were women. And hearing her talk to them, and one of the questions stuck out to me. I was sort of explaining to them that Andy or any player on tour is their own CEO. They hire their agent, they hire their coach, they fire their coach. And that elicited sort of like an audible, like, wow, from sort of the women who were there. And so to see that and be exposed to that, maybe it can I don't know, open eyes that maybe didn't even know that sort of thing was a possibility. So again, I don't have pie in the sky expectations. Yes, it's going to take boots on the ground. It's going to take a lot of work, but maybe there was some impact made, and I think that that was really special.
Really great to
No, that
hear
was
that, Blair. Well,
beautifully
so,
said.
sort of summed up and said, and yeah, hopefully more positive progress and change can come from this, despite some controversy or opposition to where it was being held. If it can start to move that needle a little bit more, and like you said, if you see it, how can you not be impressed with it? And we're always impressed with the tennis on the WTA, and we can't wait to hear more of your insights next year. So thanks for coming on. Was this Ben? Was this two times with Blair this year? I think, or
I think it was. Yeah, I think we
yeah,
had you early on in the season.
there you
Yay,
Twice.
go.
Love it.
bookends. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, Blair, have a fantastic off season. Always a pleasure to catch up. And of course, we'll chat again down the line.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
There you have it, our conversation with host Blair Henley, recapping a great week of tennis in Saudi Arabia. And kudos to Coco Gauff for her biggest title of the year, really the second biggest title of her career, if you think about it, with the U.S. Open being first from last summer. And obviously a massive win, as we mentioned, from Gabriela Dabrowski and Erin Routliffe. Dabrowski making history with this victory, the first Canadian woman to ever win the end of year championship. And as you said, Mike, it really does feel like Erin is at least part Canadian as well.
Absolutely. And that's not just because we have our red and white, glasses on, lenses on, but
Yeah.
truthfully, the amount of time that she lives here, spends here training and whatnot, that to me, I see them as pretty much an all Canadian tandem. Big result for Canadian tennis. I was on the Fan 590 tonight, actually, fielding questions about Denis Shapovalov's ATP win. And I'm like, I sure hope they ask me about what Gaby did too, because not to take away from Denis, but way bigger in terms of what the tournament was. And they did, fortunately. And so we got into that as well. And it's great to see doubles getting a little bit more exposure here in Canada between Gaby and Felix's bronze medal at the Paris Olympic Games. And now this fantastic result for her and Erin as well. There's a lot of reason to get behind doubles in this country. And, Gaby just, again, solidifying herself over the past 4 or 5 years as one of the premier players in the women's sport in doubles. And Erin Routliffe, just such a rise to the top of the women's game. I mean, literally, she was the number one player in the world towards the end of the summer and beginning of the fall. And they're the number one pair. I mean, you put the two of them together, that's the top pair in women's tennis. And I feel like, as Blair mentioned, on and off the court, they're just such a tight partnership. I think this is one that could continue for years to come, which, if so, could lead to a lot of good things for these two.
Yeah, look, I hope so. I hope they keep this going because they connect so well on the court with their chemistry, and they finished the season ranked number two, Erin Routliffe, and number three, Gabriela Dabrowski. And no Grand Slam titles this year, but that Wimbledon final they lost to Katerina Siniakova, who finishes with the world number one ranking, and American Taylor Townsend, and they got a measure of revenge this past week as they played that pairing in the final. Uh, Ironically enough, I had said this last week. Maybe those two could square off head to head again. And they, to me, are the best two doubles teams in the world. So fitting that they play the final. But just Gaby and Erin, the way they played all week, imposing themselves at net, serving big under pressure. They were formidable in all the super match tie breaks that they played. It was well deserving. Full sweep. They went 3-0 in the round robin stage as well.
And you know what? One of the most interesting things about that chat with Blair was, to me, was when she was talking about how your doubles partner is not always necessarily like a good friend of yours or someone that you even necessarily get along with. That sometimes it could be very much a formal business-like partnership. And I just wonder how you feel about that, because for me, I mean, I just play doubles for fun, but if I didn't get along with the person sharing the side of the court with me, I would find it really awkward and difficult to go out there and really be at our best if we weren't also having fun on some level, to be honest.
Well, I can speak from maybe a little bit of experience for the fact of playing inner county here just north of Toronto, which is a doubles league, and it's pretty high level, and we do it once a week every weekend and do it through the summer and through the winter. And I did have a number of weeks, especially early on when I joined, I'm playing with someone brand new who I haven't really met or spoken with. So I don't really know them on a personal level. And then you're sort of hoping you connect. And then others that you pair up with, they might be more of a tennis friend of yours, and you do know them better. But it's interesting sometimes just two styles of play just mesh really, really well. and sometimes they don't mesh as well. I think one of my good friends from the tennis club, we're 0 and 2 when we play doubles together for whatever reason. And then there's a couple others who I have a great record with in doubles, and I don't really know them well off the court. So it
There you go.
sometimes, yeah, it sometimes ends up working out that way. But I've seen Gaby and Erin banter off the court, and I think we know this is a different type of partnership. They do get along really, really well off the court, as well as the chemistry on court, which we've talked about.
So, some of their locker room videos from Saudi Arabia and the WTA Finals this week were pretty hilarious too. Having a good time, having like pre-match dance parties. I mean, just to have
Yeah.
that kind of like levity before stepping out on the court in arguably obviously one of the biggest tournaments of the year speaks volumes, I think, to the mentality that they both share. And one other doubles partnership, and we've spoken with both of them several times before, who click on and off the court and had some more success this week again as a pair are Canadians Ariana Arsenault and Mia Kupres, who teamed up yet again in a 125K doubles tournament and made it all the way to the finals. Their rankings have really surged on the doubles side of things, which is incredible considering how few professional level tournaments really they've played. But whenever they're on the same side of the court, it just seems like there's something there that really clicks. And I know Mia's back to college tennis this year, while Ariana's having her first season, really first taste of life as a professional tennis player. But I think these two could, make a go of it in doubles, let alone what they could still accomplish in singles as they're, evolving into their pro careers here at different rates.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going through the ranking list and I actually scrolled too far back looking for Arsenault because I was, hovering around the 200s. And it's like, why can't I find her? I know she's better than this. And it was like, oh my God, she's, inside the top 150. This is incredible. Just that ranking already being that high. And you think, as you said, I mean, it's really sort of a first spring and summer of tournaments and into the fall, the amount of success those two have had. Kayla Cross as well in doubles a couple times with Arsenault, and she's just outside the top 200 of the rankings. I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities for all three of those girls in singles or doubles. They're going to have those options moving forward, which is great. If we talk more success for Canadian tennis, we're going to get to Denis Shapovalov in a moment, but Rebecca Marino in Midland winning the biggest singles title of her career, the W125K, as you mentioned, winning that singles title, wrapping what's been an awesome fall for her. She won in Calgary in singles, she won the doubles title in Tampico, Mexico, and now a 125K, and she's just outside the top 100, I believe 104, finishing the season incredibly strong. And she beat a great player in the final, Alicia Parks, 6-2, 6-1, tells you how well she had been playing just all week.
It's really here to see from Rebecca, and it's, a good reminder of some of the positives, I guess, of a long tennis season. It seems like tennis pundits and fans and players as well tend to dwell on the fact that the season just never seems to end. But on the flip side, if you're not having the season that you hope for, it gives you another few months in the fall into the winter to still salvage, whether it's ranking points, some much needed prize money to keep yourself going. And so for Rebecca to have a fall like she's had, I'm sure she would be one of the players right now who would be saying, hey, the tennis season is just fine the way it is in terms of the calendar because it affords us that opportunity to still make something of a season that otherwise might have been disappointing, say if it ends, after the US Open in early September. So great to see her taking advantage of this time of year. And with Billie Jean King Cup coming up, we know we've got Leila Annie Fernandez there, Marina Stakusic. I'm assuming Rebecca's there as well, I believe,
Yeah,
correct? She's on her
Rebecca
way
Marino will
over.
be there. Gaby Dabrowski, Bianca
Gaby,
Andreescu
of
did
course.
did pull out. But as you mentioned, like look at all these players. Everyone, I suppose, apart from Layla, but even Layla, her last tournament, she made the semifinals before losing to Schneider. It feels like all of our players are in really, really good form. Stakusic, who also won a WTA 125 level just a few weeks ago, and now Marino winning this singles crown. Dabrowski being, for my money, the best, maybe the best doubles player in the world who will be competing there. Actually, I'm not sure if Siniakova will be going for Czech Republic. She might be, but one of two of the best doubles players in the world. So a lot of depth on the roster.
Yeah, they're hitting their stride at the right time, and this is important because they're coming in as defending Billie Jean King Cup champions. And
Yes.
even though it's not like a ranking point defense kind of thing, it's pride is on the line, and they had such a great, go of it a year ago, making that historic first win. And so, hey, who knows what they could do, but this is how you want to be feeling coming into a tournament like this, as confident as you can be. And Leila Annie obviously is going to be the number one singles player. I would assume Marina, they'll go with Marina Stikusic as the number two. But honestly, the way that Rebecca Marino's playing right now, also, if there's any falter, or you could really interchangeably go with one or the other and feel pretty good about them in that sort of second slot. And then Gaby Dabrowski, a clear lock in doubles with I would
Probably
imagine that
Layla. Yeah.
Layla's gonna be pulling, some double duty for sure there.
Yeah, no, as you said, a lot of options. I love Canada's chances anytime it's fall indoor tennis. And as we shift over to the men's side, Denis Shapovalov, the biggest week of his season, winning his second career ATP title at the Belgrade Open. He came through qualifying at this tournament, so he won 7 matches overall, beat a Serbian in the final, Hamad Medvedev, 6-4, 6-4. Lost only one set all tournament to Martin Fucsovics in his first round match along the way, but 5 of his 7 wins didn't even get broken once on serve, and 5 of the 7 wins can tell you his level of play and level of confidence. And I can't believe it's been this long. He hadn't won an ATP title in 5 years. So I'm honestly just so thrilled for him to have this moment again.
And it's like Denis Shapovalov, where have you been all this time, right?
Yeah.
Like he had so much early success in his career, blazing onto the scene at that National Bank Open in Montreal in 2017, having other success at some Masters 1000 level tournaments in the years to follow, quarterfinals in Australia, quarterfinals of the US Open, and a semifinalist once upon a time at Wimbledon
Yep.
as well. And then the last couple of years, it really seems like he's been kind of lost in limbo. Some of it has been due to injuries. Some of it has been just due to his own inconsistencies and, sort of between the ears, I think. And he'd probably, admit to that as well. But when he's on and he's confident and he's keeping those emotions, using them, in positive ways, my goodness, I still, obviously, he's a top 50 talent. I think even when he's not really at his best, but I still think he's got top 20 type talent there that he can tap into, and so much time still left in his career. And look, he's up to number 56 right now in the ATP rankings, and he's pretty much taken his ranking from earlier this season and cut it in half. This is great and must give him such confident vibes heading into both Davis Cup. But even, we're only about 6 or so weeks away from the start of the next season. And this is hopefully, how he can carry forward, because I think Denis Shapovalov still has a lot to say out there on the ATP tour, and this is a good reminder of that.
Yeah, look, he's still just mid 20s. As you mentioned, someone who had success at such an early age. I mean, that win over Rafael Nadal at the National Bank Open Rogers Cup at the time was 2017. We're talking seven,
Seven years ago.
7.5 years ago even. So it's really, we saw a lot of success as a teenager. You look at how the tour has evolved since. We've seen a lot of change in the faces who are on top. This is a player who's been top 10 before, even in the rankings. And, you know, you look back at what happened at last year. I think we forget he had that knee injury, which halted his Wimbledon. He lost in the fourth round there and then didn't play for the rest of the year. And even when he returned earlier this season, he was still kind of laying the building blocks and knew he wasn't quite near his best. But when he's in flow, especially on like a fast indoor surface, 6 of his 7 ATP finals have been on indoor hard court surfaces. One of them being the Paris Masters 1000, where he lost to Djokovic there in the finals. But it's very clear he has that type of high-powered, aggressive game, big lefty serve, likes to come forward. When it's all clicking and all in flow, he's such a threat on a fast hard court. And as we know, he's such a threat at Wimbledon when he's playing great too, that I'd love to see this carry over to a full calendar year in 2025, where he's someone you look at his game and think he's a guy who can be playing in the second week of basically any slam.
Absolutely. And, now he's going to carry this forward to Davis Cup, which we're going to focus a little bit more on in our next episode as they head off to Spain and take on Team Germany. And Dennis is going to be the guy there. He's going to be the number one singles guy. I'd be shocked if he wasn't playing doubles alongside Vasek Pospisil as well. And he can handle that workload. He's proven in the past he can handle that kind of heavy workload for Team Canada. He often plays his best when he's representing the red and white. And I think Canada's got as much of a shot as anyone else in this tournament. And I sure hope they can get by Germany, because I would just love to see that potential matchup in the semifinals of the finals, I guess if you want to call it
Yeah.
that, against Spain and Rafa Nadal and Carlos Alcaraz.
That would be completely electric. I really, really hope for that matchup. We'll see. And we should note, Alexander Zverev is not going to be competing for Germany. So if you're looking for an edge there in that tie, I think Canada has it in that quarterfinal. And ideally, maybe you don't go down to doubles, but Shapovalov is probably going to have a tough match against Jan-Lennard Struff, who's given him plenty of problems in the past.
It's
You look at
true.
that head to head, it's 6-3 for Struff. He's a good player. So we'll see what happens. That's just over a week away. Should talk about the ATP Finals, which is already underway, and bringing the top eight from the season. We have Group Nastase featuring the world number one Yannick Sinner, Taylor Fritz, Alex de Minaur, and Daniil Medvedev, and then Group John Newcomb, which has Carlos Alcaraz, Andrei Rublev, Alexander Zverev, and Casper Ruud. And just a couple early results to already mention. Casper Ruud upsetting Carlos Alcaraz 7-5, 6-1. His first ever win over a top three player on a hard court, which I found was a little bit surprising. And Taylor Fritz already getting a first match win over Daniil Medvedev. So I'm sensing maybe a bit of unpredictability at the finals tournament this year. At the same time, I'm
Yeah.
probably leaning towards Yannick Sinner being the favorite.
I mean, by this point of the season, you just never know what kind of physical capacity and, as importantly, mental capacity these players are in, right? Like, who's ready to check out and call it a season and enjoy that short, week or two before they start training hard again for the new season? What kind of injuries are they, coming in with that have been kind of at them all year long? And it sure doesn't give them a big turnaround in terms of getting ready for 2025. So yeah, maybe we'll see a little bit more unpredictability as the round robin progresses. I'm a little bit curious about the names for the two groups. I mean, nothing against Ilyana Stase and John Newcomb, but these weren't the two names I was expecting, and I wonder what the rationale is behind that. To be honest with you.
I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it's something that we're going to see get changed and switched up every year. Yeah, but no disrespect to Ilya Nastase and John Newcomb, two great champions of the past. You just mentioned like who is sort of still high energy at this stage and who is maybe checking out, kind of looking towards off season. And as I said, Taylor Fritz beat Daniil Medvedev. Medvedev in his he had a bit of a meltdown on the court as well, and in his press conference revealed he's not getting any pleasure from playing tennis right now. And he's felt that way for a number of months and said he is ready for the season to be over, and was talking a little bit more. We've heard him, talk about the tennis balls quite a lot. He brought up the tennis balls again, feeling like he can't produce the quality that he once could. He can't accelerate through the ball. Only the very top guys can really do damage to these tennis balls, and he seems a little lost right now. And look, it's been a really really rough season for Medvedev given his standards. He hasn't won a single title. He did make the Australian Open finals, but otherwise a letdown year.
It's going to be interesting to see what changes the sport goes through in the next 5, 10, 20 years. I wonder if we'll still be talking about the tennis balls, 20 years from now. If this is just
Maybe.
always, or is there some way we can finally settle this? Like, could one of these tennis ball companies just come in and make the others an offer they can't refuse, buy them all up, come up with one tennis ball, and just use it all the time, and that's it? But, it's just one of those kind of funny player. Quirks and pet peeves that I think only if you're a real tennis player can you appreciate. And there obviously is some, authenticity to the complaint. But I think for a lot of casual tennis fans too, it's like, what are you complaining about? And what
Oh
difference
yeah.
is there really between these
Yeah.
balls? But there is, but it would just be nice if we could see some sort of consistency applied tournament to tournament, so the players kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. Casper Ruud sort of shared the other side of the equation when he was asked about the tennis balls because he was asked about what Medvedev had said, and Ruud said he doesn't like a constant change, but he is of the feeling that there are some players that say like the Dunlop ball a little bit more. And then there's some players who like the Penn ball a bit more and it suits their game better. And some players who like the Wilson ball more. So then there are spots of the season where you're going to be happier with the tennis ball or you're going to be less happy with the tennis ball. And maybe it kind of evens out over time.
I like whichever tennis ball leads me to the fewest double faults, which is, nothing
Yeah.
to do with the tennis ball and everything to do with this guy right here.
Yeah, up between the ears. But yeah, I mean, if I'm making my predictions right now, I don't see Medvedev escaping the group stage based on those comments. I do wonder if Carlos Alcaraz was apparently feeling a bit sick in that match against Casper Ruud. I wonder if he can summon the energy to fight through and still give one last push. But some things are already decided here. Jannik Sinner's already clinched the year-end number one. I wouldn't be that surprised to see a different champion like Alexander Zverev has won this title before.
Well, I was just going to say this is exactly the kind of tournament that Alexander Zverev is going to win. And all the critics, who I would at times, lots of times, consider myself one of, would say, well, it's still not a slam. You know what I mean? So
True.
it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to do it again. Sinner, obviously, count out at your own peril. And, just to throw in a little curveball there, maybe. But Alex de Minaur just impresses me so much with
Yeah.
his compete level and just his desire to want to prove people wrong. Well, what better place to prove people wrong than with a real strong showing here to close out the year?
Yeah, that would be amazing. And no Novak Djokovic, as we I think alluded to our last episode. This is the first time this tournament has not had a member of the Big Three since 2001, which is
Wow.
wild.
That
Um,
is crazy. And yet, I mean, what have they not done to, surprise us and shock us over the last 23 years? My goodness. Well, time
quite
for
a
some
reign.
change, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. I suppose it is time. I will mention as we wrap, there was a men's 25K in St. Augustine, Quebec this past week. Liam Draxel beating Alexi Galarneau in an all-Canadian final in straight sets, and we have Drummondville going on as well. And Billie Jean King Cup Finals starting up on Sunday. Canada will face the winner of Germany and Great Britain in the semifinals. Guys, thank you so much for listening to Matchpoint Canada. We will talk to you next time.